Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You can be seated. Roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. Coulter?
Here.
Mr. Lovett?
Here.
Mr. Cook?
Here.
Mrs. Knight? Here. And Mr. Schmidt?
Here.
Perfect. Thank you. Approval of minutes. Are there any corrections or changes to November 22nd regular council meeting minutes that were sent out? Seeing none, those stand as written and distributed. Reports and communication. Mayor Hardman.
Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, for those of you who attended yesterday, we had an amazing employee appreciation holiday, luncheon, bruncheon, whatever we want to call it. 144 individuals that were signed up, and I think we pretty much had that many folks out yesterday. That's probably one of the largest crowds we've had in a while for that event, so it was great to see. I think they had a good time getting together, and thank you all for helping to make those kind of events happen so we can show appreciation for the good folks who really make the city run. Speaking of making the city run, you have legislation tonight with regard to our fire and our police contracts. I think this is probably the first time since we've had unions that we've actually have, assuming you all vote for it, and I hope you do, we'll have contracts in place before they actually start. So I want to give a big thank you to Rachel Combs and her first round of negotiations with both unions, both police chiefs, and police and fire chief in their first rounds of negotiations, the representatives of the FOP, the representatives of the IAFF that have made that a success. I am very glad that we're able to go into 2023 with those agreements in place, and we know what fine folks we have that work for us, and so we're very glad to be able to present those for your approval tonight. Speaking of which as well, for your approval tonight are budgetary items for 2023, probably the biggest thing you do as a council every year, the most important thing you do as a council every year, and a lot of the heavy lifting is done by Scott McKeon and his team, and so a big thanks to them in making that happen. There's a lot of accounting and figures and things that get thrown around to make that a success, so that we can continue to be a success as a city. And once again, we've had a very good year from both a revenue side as well as an expense side on the way of our department heads spending thriftily, but making sure that we're doing for our residents what they want us to do, as well as our business community. Some of you have seen information or there's things going around about new metro routes that are in Sharonville and going through Sharonville. I have had Anna reach out to Metro just to get some more details about, where those routes are, what they're doing, where they're stopping. So if you have questions or information, I encourage you, give Anna a call. She can help you with some of the information Metro has given her, or she can certainly give you our contact with Metro. So if you're getting questions from residents that you feel like you need to answer, they are able to do that. It's encouraging. We like to be a connected community. We want to make sure that we're providing our residents what they need, and it's also resulting in dollars that come back to us as a community as well by having these routes in Sharonville, because I believe we actually have already received some Issue 7 funds for projects that we are doing here in the city by being able to partner with these organizations. So, but they also realize that we don't want to be a disruption to our community and what goes on. So they're very receptive to hearing about issues that we might have. So please feel free to inquire if you wish or have questions about those new routes that are crossing through our community. With that said, I wish you all a very happy holidays. I know Jim's got a whole list of things to talk about here as well, so I will defer to him for the rest, as well as our guest here this evening, who's going to share some of his great work. So that's all I have, unless anyone has questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, then we will go ahead and move on to our Safety Service Director, Mr. Lucas.
Thanks. I also wanted to thank council for the Christmas banquet yesterday. Folks that I talked to, and even today, were still commenting on how positive and never take that for granted. That type of event does not happen in every city, and you know, when you have something every year like we do, sometimes it is taken for granted, but I hope we never do. So thank you for council for supporting that and funding that. So there are 9 pieces of legislation to be voted on this evening. The first one, ordinance 2022-59, is old business. This ordinance deals with high grass complaints. Really stems out of a law committee discussion when we were talking about the high grass assessments from a few meetings ago. Sue Knight mentioned, hey, isn't there a better process that we could take for repeat offenders? And so currently, whenever somebody violates the high grass ordinance, we start the process over each time. And Sue gave us an example from another community where they only have to notify each resident once. And if there's a repeat offender, so be it. The way the council legislation is drafted, the Community Development Department will have some discretion with that. So if they know they're of a specific instance where they may not want to cite again, they'll have that discretion. I don't know if Sue or anybody else from Law Committee wants to talk about that at all, but that in a nutshell is that piece of legislation.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ordinance 2022-70E, Scott's here to talk about dealing with our ARPA fire responder grant.
Good evening. We got a handful of pieces of legislation to reference here. It was a busy week last week, kind of collaborating with HR on a few pieces of these, and so Luke roughed a lot of these in, and we wrapped them up, but it's always a busy time of year. Ordinance 2022-70E, this is the ARPA grant, first responders. We authorized to accept those funds last week, or last council meeting. This establishes the fund. We will account for this in the 243 fund, and this is also included in the original 2023 budget that is in a couple of ordinances. Ordinance 2022-71 is the annual salary ordinance. We are asking for late delivery of this. We made some modifications this afternoon when we sent the draft out on Friday. We did not, we held off on extending the 4% COLA to the FOP members. They on their side have voted to accept that last night, and it's on the agenda to approve that contract. So that has been updated with those. There's a, so any other questions about the salary ordinance? Rachel will be coming up here in a minute to discuss contracts. The ordinance 2022-72E, this is the 2023 budget. I sent out a reconciliation earlier this afternoon in email. There were only 3 items that were not discussed in here in early November that we've added to that. So the ARPA grant was the one. The completion of the OPWC portion of Houck Road was the other. And there's one more item there that's escaping me, but just a few items. So that reconciles the budget packet we talked about in early November to what's on the bottom of that ordinance. So 2022-73E, this is the annual transfers and advance ordinance. This approves the transfers that will be made out of 605. Out of the general fund to the capital fund, the facility improvement fund, separation benefits fund. There is also an advance approved from the fire fund to the ARPA fund to cover those salaries as we wait for reimbursement that will probably come in the second half of the year. And those will be made quarterly. So after the 2 years of the grant has run, the fire fund will be made whole for that. And there is also, back in the 2023 budget, is the contribution from the 605 fund to the 608 Convention Center debt fund. We've taken a hiatus of that as we kind of let the pandemic run its route and let TOT taxes get back into order. 2022-74E is probably the one that it takes the most time here and really taken the most effort since the budget work session, is actually wrapping up the 2022 budget. There's several modifications that go on this. There's a handful of negatives that are just minor cleanup items, areas where we did not collect as much money as we thought we would in different grant and special revenue funds. There's several additions on there. The one is where we're changing kind of our accounting method. We are sourcing new vehicles currently. They're showing up right now from Enterprise, a new batch of vehicles. We've decided, we came in here and got approval last September to account for those at kind of like a net, what the net trade-in would be. This is to gross up that, where we will expend the full value of what we're going to pay for, and then we will receive what we're going to receive from those. We do estimate to do pretty well again on the ones that we're turning in, the F-250s. We'll do decently on the city vehicles that we're turning in as well. So the net effect is still actually probably a hair better than it was a year ago when we asked for that $130,000. But this is changing it to account for it at gross. There is an advance at the bottom of the ordinance for the Twin Creeks project. We were kind of hoping that would get wrapped up by the end of the year. It's not getting wrapped up. So that is to extend some funds over there as we wait for that project to complete and get reimbursement. There is a return of a portion of the Houck Road funds. We will capture another portion of that. Next year we'll come back and ask for some approval to finalize it and close that out. We're waiting on a minor reimbursement there. So we're recouping $450,000 of the approximately $570,000 that we advanced to the Houck Road project. Speaking of Houck Road, we also got our first issue 7 reimbursement from SORTA today of about $109,000 for the transportation improvements we made with sidewalks for the last mile of transportation on Houck Road. So that did start to come in just today. And then the kind of the more exciting piece of that ordinance is the set-asides. We are setting aside from the fire fund $75,000 for separation benefits, $1.5 million for future equipment purchases. And on the general side, we're making a set-aside of $200,000 to the facility improvement fund, $75,000 for separation benefits, and similar to previous years, it will say up to $3.5 million for capital. That's sort of a high-end estimate of what we might hopefully have. We're more likely that number is going to be in the 1.75, 1.8 range. We're kind of crossing our fingers hoping for $2 million. So that's another healthy set-aside at the end of 2022. Any questions on any of those ordinances?
Is everyone good? I think we're good. Thank you,
Thank you.
Scott.
Okay, ordinance 2022-75E. If approved, will continue our long-lasting relationship with Focus Capital Solutions and George Glover, who's here this evening. These are 2 agreements, one for the Convention Center out of the 605 fund and one through this General City out of the 760 fund, both for $18.75 per month. I know George wanted to say a few words, so George, come on up.
Good evening. First of all, I want to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you for the long-term relationship I've had with the city of Sharonville and the Sharonville Convention Center. I've enjoyed this very much. It's given me the opportunity to learn more about the municipality of Sharonville and the runnings and the goings of the Sharonville Convention Center, but also it gives us the opportunity to continue to work with and expand our relationship with our local delegation. And on that point, when I talk about the Sharonville Convention Center, I think many of you might already know that the state of Ohio every 2 years has what they call the biannual state of Ohio capital budget, where in fact the state of Ohio will appropriate grants or monies from the local state taxpayer dollars to various organizations and groups throughout the state of Ohio. The bulk of those funds always traditionally go for, if you will, large state prisons, state office towers, universities, anything that is of a public nature. There is always a group of funds set aside, approximately $300 to $400 million, that are set aside for the state legislature to, if you will, divvy up and spend amongst themselves. These are called community projects, and they are sought after very, very vociferously. And I'm happy to tell you that, again, as we have in the past, the Sharonville Convention Center was the recipient of a significant state of Ohio capital grant earlier this year. Just briefly, background, I know many of you know that the Sharonville Convention Center has also received various state of Ohio capital grants in the past. This time around, it was even more competitive than ever because we were competing against approximately 50 to 60 other organizations within Hamilton County who all had similar cases they wanted to make to their state legislators, which they did. We went through a local prioritization and vetting process by which each project was ranked. We received a good ranking, thanks to the leadership of Jim Dowden and certainly of the mayor, Kevin Hardman. And Jim, we all pitched in and we worked hard to make a very solid presentation, which was warmly received. Then it goes to the Columbus, and that's where the fun really begins behind closed doors. Because ultimately, it is up to each member of the state legislature, regardless if you're Republican or Democrat, House or Senate, to make the ultimate decision. We were recommended for $500,000 by the local group here in Hamilton County. When the project got to Columbus, we redoubled our efforts and reached out even further and lobbied, if you will, advocated even further, and we convinced our delegation from Hamilton County to increase that amount from $500,000 to $600,000. We were one of the very few groups or organizations in Hamilton County that actually saw an increase when the project went to Columbus. So, again, congratulations. Those funds, I'm sure, will be well spent. They are $600,000, and again symbolizes the strong effort we've developed over the year with our delegation and through the leadership of both the Convention Center and the City of Sharonville. Very briefly, when we talk about a singular project or a singular success story like the Sharonville Convention Center and the State of Ohio capital budget, we also should talk about the leadership that we're involved in through the Hamilton County Municipal League. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. It's led very well by your own mayor, Kevin Hardman. And through that group, we now have efforts to redouble or even expand our efforts on behalf of certain pieces of legislation in Columbus that can impact municipalities or villages. Examples of some of those might be a bill that has been introduced by two of our area legislators, one in Brown County and one in Hamilton County, that will increase the contribution level for fire and police pension funds. This bill, as you can imagine, ignited a lot of interest in Columbus by all sorts of individual municipalities, villages, and townships, and their respective trade association in Columbus. It went through a lot of hearings. The bill itself was not passed this year, which is probably a good thing, but it was never intended to. It was beginning the conversation and the discussion so the state of Ohio could begin to think about what level, if any, of a higher contribution do they want to make for the fire and police pension funds. We fully expect that bill to be reintroduced again next year and perhaps even be made part of the state of Ohio operating budget, which will be introduced in early February. And as you may know, by state constitution, it has to be enacted and signed law by the governor by June 30th. So be aware for that. You'll probably hear much more about that. We'll be engaged in that, not just on behalf of the city of Sharonville, but also through the Hamilton County Municipal League. A final note about collaboration and working together in partnership. We have found that there are certain common issues, if you will, certain common bills, like the one I just referenced. We can also work in tandem with the Hamilton County Township Association because they're impacted by this bill just as we are as well. And so through, again, the programs that we offer through the Hamilton County Municipal League, sometimes they're co-sponsored by the Township Association, and when we get all of us involved through Hamilton County, singularly through the City of Sharonville, through the Hamilton County Municipal League, or through the Hamilton County Township Association, we can be impactful to our state legislators when they hear and see what impact this bill might have on them. So I leave with you that thought that yes, we do individual work as we have done with the capital budget. We do work through our state or county trade association, but we also will reach out in a collaborative way and also work as a partner with the Township Association whenever it's necessary. I'm going to hit the pause button right now and see if I can answer any questions you might have.
Anyone have questions? Mayor?
I don't have any questions, I just have a comment that, we are certainly very fortunate to have George working on behalf of the city and for that matter, for our municipal league here in Hamilton County. He does an excellent job of forming the relationships that are necessary for us to take a priority with regard to our representatives here in the State House. So thank you, George. I hope you all will support your resolution or ordinance later tonight to keep him employed by us here at the City of Sharonville, because he truly is a valuable asset for us to have advocating on our behalf as a city to the state of Ohio. So thank you, sir.
Can I add one more point to that?
Yes.
I should walk right now, I realize that.
You
When
go
we
right.
talk about legislators, our state legislators in Hamilton County, we have a great mixture of them, if you will. Some Republicans, some Democrats, some House, and some Senate. But we often find that when we approach them on a bipartisan basis, we can also be as effective as when we approach them as a partisan basis as well. And that's where we come in handy. That's where we can really work our magic, if you will, to reach out with every member of Hamilton County, regardless of what the party affiliation is or regardless of what the House or Senate. Many of them sit on key committees. Many of them sit on key leadership positions. We're fortunate to have that kind of political power, if you will, in Southwest Ohio. And I'm glad to take advantage of that power as well. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for the opportunity to work on your behalf as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the last two pieces of legislation deal with the union agreements that the mayor talked about earlier this evening. Rachel and the chiefs are here tonight to talk about each one. First one is the fire.
Good evening. How is everybody this evening?
Good.
And I very recently found out that apparently Chief Nesbitt and I are both working the road tonight, so Mr. Mayor, I have no idea what we're going to get into. Be warned. First of all, I want to thank Rachel for really working with us on this contract. The fire contract we were able to do without any attorneys in the room, just myself and the E-Board, and with Rachel pointing us in the right direction more than once, we were able to get this done. Just a very quick, just a couple of highlights. Our contract this year was a lot of language change. As you're aware, we just finished up the current contract about 16 months ago. So we did some cleanup change on the grievance policy. We did some language change on the probationary period and some better definition of what that probationary period is. We changed some language on our acting officers and amount of pay and then how many hours they have to work in that position for that pay. We made a change with sick time occurrences, brought us closer in line, actually I think exactly in line with city policy. And then the only other highlight is we did some language cleanup on scheduling time off. That actually makes it a lot more administratively friendly for the battalion chiefs that are doing the scheduling. So nothing huge in our contract. Those were just a couple of highlights and some language changes we made, and certainly for any questions.
Anyone have questions regarding it? Thank you for all your hard work on this, you and Rachel.
Thank you.
So lease contract negotiations, we too did a lot of clarification on some wording. We came to some agreements on definitions that helped us better prepare for the future in our areas of specialized units and expanding the department's functionality into a little bit more specialty elements. Additionally, we found some common ground on limiting or at least finding a better way to administer comp time, which is reducing our amount of time that we have to pay out for overtime. That was a big accomplishment, and it There was a lot of discussion that went into that, but our rank and file officers and sergeants alike found middle ground with us, and we came to an agreement that is very amicable for the city and for them as well. So that pretty much kind of sums it up. That's what we accomplished.
Any questions regarding the police? Thank you very much for all your hard work.
I just wanted to say one thing really quick too, because I think it's an incredible feat to be able to do that in your first year as chief, so thank you guys for getting involved.
We truly couldn't have done it without Given Scott McKeon's comments about the FOP CBA wages being incorporated into the late delivery salary ordinance, council should probably consider ordinance 2022-78E before ordinance 2022-71E.
And I have them both marked as late delivery, because we did not have 78E, so, okay, perfect.
And that's it.
Not as late delivery.
Was there changes from that?
Oh, I don't know. Was it late? I thought it was late delivery, no?
It was included in the packet, so is that technically, the intent was late delivery, but it was
That's what I
included in the
thought. That's
packet,
what, in the
so.
meeting that I was in law committee, that's what I thought we were doing. But
So I don't consider that.
late? Okay,
Five.
then I can take it off. I'll make sure we don't do that then. We don't need it. Yep, sounds good. All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Lucas? Seeing none, I really don't have much of a report this evening. We'll go ahead and go to our clerk of council, Mrs. Buhite.
Thank you. There's a public hearing on, in the second meeting in January on ordinance 2022-76E regarding a zoning change. So I'll make a better announcement at that next meeting when I have that.
Okay, not a problem. Our auditor is absent. Mr. Irie, our treasurer. is
Thank
doing
you.
Double duty?
Double duty, yes. I have to report here, this is our final report for the year. The tax report is in the hands of the clerk of council, and we are 92% through the year. And the big news, I guess, is that the lodging tax receipts are 5,000 above where they were in 2019, which is a great surprise, up 27% year-to-date. Income tax receipts up 6.34% to date, as well as all of our receipts exceeded the estimates for the year, and this is 92% through the year, and we are over 100% in receipts for the general fund, fire fund, convention center fund. So again, just good news to end the year. So
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Law Director, Mr. Lippard.
Couple of things, thank you. I was asked for an opinion on abstaining on a vote, and I indicated that I would publicly state that opinion. Basically, when a council member has a vote that they feel they need to abstain on, they don't need to state the reason necessarily, but they can still vote on an emergency rule suspension motion on that ordinance. So one being procedural, the other being substantive. Even though we're not going to run into a situation tonight where we don't have enough members, it could happen in the future. So just because somebody abstains on an ordinance does not mean they need to abstain on the rule suspension motion on that ordinance. The other thing, just making an announcement for the Obscure Records Commission. We will have a meeting on January 10th of 2023 next year at 6:30 p.m. before our regular council meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Opportunity for residents that wish to be heard this evening?
Jim Schmidt, 12215 Pickwick Place. I just want to mention, on Saturday morning, I went to Walmart in Evendale, and I saw a whole bunch of Sharonville police cars there.
Got worried, didn't you?
And, yeah, and as I went in, of course, I saw Chief Nesbitt and quite a few other officers. I said, what the heck's going on? He said, oh, it's Shop with a Cop. I said, oh, can one of them help me? I was looking for a toy for a 1-year-old. I don't know what 1-year-olds want. But anyway, I did buy the toy, and as I was walking out, the one lady officer, she came up and said, did you find what you want? And I said, yeah, do you think this will be good? Oh, yeah. So I appreciate the help from the Sharonville police.
Perfect, thank you. Professional shoppers now, too. Council committees, community development, Mr. Wilson.
Tomorrow night, there is a meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals at 6:30, followed immediately by a meeting of the Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you. Community services, Mr. Lovett.
Thank you. I have no report today, but our next meeting will be Wednesday, January 4th at 4 p.m. All are welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Budget and finance and project oversight, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. No report for budget and finance, and our next meeting is still to be determined, so stay tuned. Project oversight, we did meet tonight. I'll have my report at the next meeting, and the next scheduled meeting for that committee is also to be determined.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Honored citizens, Mrs. Knight.
Yes, tonight I am honoring all Sharonville employees who participated in the past weekend of festivities. We had Shop with a Cop, mentioned by Mr. Schmidt, Breakfast with Santa at the Rec Center, Christmas on the Loop, which was awesome, and the employee brunch. And I just want to thank all these employees for caring so much about the city and their citizens. Thank you.
Law and Public Safety, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. The next Law and Public Safety Committee meeting will be January 3rd at 4 p.m. Administrative Conference Room.
Okay, you okay down there?
Yeah,
I know, frogs in our throat tonight.
we're good. Yeah, we're good now. Thank
Okay.
you.
A rule suspension motion, first and only reading with immediate effectivity for ordinances 2022, or I'm sorry, before we do that, let's accept late delivery. Is there a motion to accept late delivery of ordinance 2022-71E? So moved by Mr. Wilson, second by Mr. Lovett. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, yes? Yes. Those opposed, no? And that does carry. Now we'll do our rule suspension motion for first and only reading with immediate effectivity. Ordinance 2022-70E, 2022-71E, 2022-72E, 2022-73E, 2022-74E, 2022-75E, 2022-77E, and 2022-78E. Is there a motion? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mrs. Knight. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, yes? Yes. Those opposed, no, and that motion carries. We'll move on to unfinished business.
Third reading of ordinance 2022-59, amending codified ordinance 521.13, weed removal to allow for only one notification per calendar year.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-59? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mrs. Knight. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes?
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-59 has been approved.
New business?
All right. First and only reading of emergency ordinance 2022-70E, establishing ARPA First Responders Grant Fund and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-70E? So moved by Mr. Coulter, second by Mr. Tankersley. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes?
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2022-70E has been approved.
Can you read 78 first, please?
Oh. 78 first?
Yeah, before you read 71.
Okay.
That's what they requested, so we pass the ordinance first.
Okay.
Is that what you wanted? Yeah. Okay.
77 and 78?
No, just 78.
Okay. First and only reading of emergency ordinance 2022-78E, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts which the Council of Sharonville hereby approves, approving the collective bargaining agreements with the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Inc., which represents the City of Sharonville patrol officers and sergeants bargaining units for January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2025, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-78E? So moved by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Lovett. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2022-78E has been approved.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. And back to 71?
Yep.
All right. Ordinance 2022-71E, an ordinance of the City of Sharonville, Ohio, authorizing employee hourly rates.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-71E? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
I will respectfully abstain from this vote.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-71E has been approved. The first and only reading of ordinance 2022-72E, an ordinance to make permanent appropriations for the expenses and other expenditures of the City of Sharonville, State of Ohio, during the fiscal year ending December 31, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-72E? So moved by Mr. Cook, second by Mr. Lovett. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-72E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2022-73E, transfer and advance of funds for the year 2023 and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-73E? So moved by Mrs. Knight, second by Mr. Coulter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-73E has been approved. First and only reading of ordinance 2022-74E, amending 2022 appropriations for various funds.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-74E? So moved by Mr. Schmidt, second by Mr. Cook. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Ordinance 2022-74E has been approved. First and only reading of emergency ordinance 2022-75E, authorizing 2 professional contracts with Focus Capital Solutions LLC for legislative consulting services.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-75E? So moved by Mr. Coulter, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
And Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2022-75E has been approved. This is just a first reading of ordinance 2022-76, approving the recommendation of Planning Commission to adopt Sharonville Codified Ordinance 111309. First and only reading of emergency ordinance 2022-77E, authorizing the Safety Service Director to enter into a contract, which the Council of Sharonville hereby approves, approving the collective bargaining agreement with Sharonville Professional Firefighters, IAFF Local 4498, for January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2025, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion to pass ordinance 2022-77E? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Wilson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Tankersley?
Yes.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes.
Mr. Coulter?
Yes.
Mr. Lovett?
Yes.
Mr. Cook?
Yes.
Mrs. Knight?
Yes.
Mr. Schmidt?
Yes.
Emergency ordinance 2022-77E has been approved.
Are you tired?
No, I'm good. I thought I lost 78, that's why I
No,
know.
you did good. Thank you very much. That was a lot.
Yeah.
All right, it's another opportunity for residents that wish to be heard this evening. Mr. Schmidt, you have a Merry Christmas.
All of you have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you for always being here. Are there any other matters before Mr. Lovett?
I would just like to thank everybody. Because of you guys, I sent an email out here, but because of you guys, we've been able to adopt a family with 5 children, 2 young parents and 5 children for the community fund this Christmas. My wife has wrapped 56 gifts for them so far. We got a few more over here, but for a family who things were looking grim, you guys have really, in our community, these are folks that live in Sharonville, you guys have really brightened their Christmas. So thank you all. You guys are genuine. Thank you.
I do want to just piggyback on that because the parents ask for nothing. They only ask for their children. So that was, so thank you guys for all chipping in. So anyone else from there?
So I want to congratulate all of you because in a time when we have a county that is reneging on promises with regard to property rollbacks or tax rollbacks, a city of Cincinnati who is doing the same thing, you all tonight passed a budget of almost $55 million in spending. That is a structurally balanced general fund budget, does so without borrowing within the general fund, and continues not to borrow in the general fund. I think we have a structurally balanced fire department budget as well, and that continues to do very, very well. And we do all of that by not taxing our property owners in the city of Sharonville. And so you all should be commended for continuing to exceed the needs of our community and providing for them through the budget. Thank you all very much for continuing to support our residents, our businesses, our property owners, and making this city the great city that it is to live, work, and play in. And happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Lovett.
Thank you. Apologies to Mrs. Buhite for expanding the minutes yet again. But a couple of public thank yous. As most of you know, in my other professional role, I work down at the prosecutor's office, and I'm the assistant chief of the municipal division, which basically means I train new lawyers how to be prosecutors.
God bless you.
So everybody's either aware or had the opportunity to do the VR training down at the police station, and Lieutenant Griffith invited my group of municipal prosecutors down there to see what law enforcement officers are dealing with, hopefully not on a daily basis, but how they're trained and whatnot. And himself and Detective Kaplinger were awesome, and they did a great job with them. My other thank you goes out to the fire department. I accepted the invitation from Chief Sunderman to join his shift today for breakfast, and they were very welcoming, and we had a good breakfast at 7 a.m. at Station 87. I think there's 2 more days of it in case anybody else wants to join them at 7 a.m. So thank you to both of you, and happy holidays, like everybody else said. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Coulter.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to participate in Shop with a Cop on Saturday, as well as I saw you down there, Vicki. And what a tremendous impact those officers were making on these children's lives. Elementary school kids who were nominated by teachers because of their disadvantaged situation financially. Every officer there had a smile on his face or her face. Every officer had more than one child, and it was like herding cats for them at some point in time. But there were a lot of other volunteers there, too, that helped participate, and I think it made a tremendous impact in their lives. The child that I assisted with wanted to buy nothing but gifts for his father and his brother, which I thought was really nice. Down at Walmart, there were a number of other police agencies there, but we by far had the largest number of officers and children participating. So kudos to the chief and the police department and all the officers involved. Thank you.
And I think they all have they all received coats and shoes and goodie bags. So that was very nice. If you want to brag a little bit about your department.
So this is the first year for Officer Hayes as our community resource officer, and he spearheads this, but he has said it 100 times, he can't do it alone. And it takes a lot of hands, and it takes all year to put this together. But we were able to bring enough resources for 30 kids to help support their families. Every family gets a care package, which basically provides food and other things for them, hats and gloves and things. And then when we get the kids, we treat them to a breakfast. We take them down to Walmart. We make sure that they've got snowshoes and winter coats. So we make sure that their needs are taken care of. And then we whatever funds we were able to raise through the year, we use for them to be able to provide for not just them, but their families, their moms, their dads, their siblings. And it means a lot. Somebody even bought an outfit for their dog. And it makes so much difference to these kids. And then we take them back to the convention center, and we host a party, and we couldn't do it without all of your support, and the Blue Goose and Kevin there makes everything happen. He brings in his staff, and we go to the convention center, and Jim Downton puts on a fabulous spread for us. And it means so much, not just to these kids, but when you take them back to their homes, and the whole family's in need. But they're so appreciative of everything that these officers are doing and our professional civilian staff. They really bring the holiday spirit, and it means a lot. And it means a lot to me. It just totally charges my batteries. And our officers, our retired officers, our officers that we've lost over the years, their families come back year after year. And it's just a large family event. And thank you for recognizing that and all your kind words, but it really makes a big difference in this community.
Well, and if you're reading your post on Facebook, you'll notice that all the teachers are saying thank you, and how the kids showed up for school on Monday with their new coats and their new shoes and bragging and talking, and they're making friends now. I know Officer Wilson has 3 brand new friends, besties.
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and is there a motion for adjournment? So moved by Mr. Tankersley, second by Mr. Wilson. All those in favor, yes? Yes. Those opposed, no, and we will stand adjourned. Thank you.